Good evening, everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays. Please rise and welcome to the Town Board Work Session for December 12, 2023. Sir, do you want to lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you could just remain standing, please, for a moment of silence. And please keep in your thoughts and prayers all of our first responders, police, fire, ambulance, EMTs, paramedics who service us on a daily basis and keep us safe. And also for the bravest men and women that this country has ever known that are fighting for our freedom every day. Freedom is not free. Thank you. Amen. Okay. We're going to be real quick because we're running a little bit behind. Sorry about that, folks. We had a few things we had to go over to get into this meeting. And I know we have a Zoom waiting, I believe, right, Diana? We do. Okay. Just real quick, Veterans Advisory is canceled for this month. And when is the
third Wednesday of January?
Third Wednesday of January.
7 p.m. at Cappellini Center.
And we had a really great holiday light parade last week. I think the biggest ever.
That was huge.
Huge. It was. And we had the second annual tree lighting ceremony in Shrub Oak, which went wonderful. Thank you to Jim and his crew, to Yvonne and her crew that made this a special night for all the kids of all ages, from 80 down to probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old that hung out and waited for Santa and the Grinch and the reindeer and Frosty. So it really, really, really was a nice time. It seems to be growing exponentially each year. So I'm not going to belabor all that because we are running a little bit late. So,
The menorah lighting too, though.
What's that?
The menorah lighting was.
Oh yes, the menorah lighting was also this weekend, and that was really, really kind of cool because Rabbi Heber brought in a laser light show. It was great. I've never seen anything like it. You put the glasses on, and you see all sorts of different things, all related to Hanukkah and so on. And every time I have Rabbi come in here, and he comes in every year to give a little service here in Town Hall, he does a wonderful job. I learned a little bit more about Hanukkah. We had a conversation with regard to how the candles are actually lit. I didn't know that you had to go a certain direction with that, but I learned that this year. So very interesting and very, very informative. But anyway, thank you all so much. All right. 3176 Lincoln Drive. We got Gabriel Salmon. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Now we're going to be talking about a wetland permit, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is
Good evening.
Salmon. I'm the architect representing the owner, and we are here to present the project, which is kind of small project. We are renovating existing house, a minor inside the renovation, new windows, siding. Well, we're building a new deck, which is about 14 by 12, about 168 square feet, and that's why we're here.
Okay.
Other things we're doing to help out the environment, we're providing shrubbery around the coastline, mainly 3 gallons shrubbery, oaks, different sizes, about 3, silky, dogwood, red oyster.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you speak into the mic, because we can't hear you up here, and I know they can't hear you out there.
So we're providing 3 different type of shrubbery. They all need 3 gallons of water, and they mainly dogwood, they're listed on the plan.
Okay, now we're going for a wetlands permit here. Is it in the buffer that the deck is going to extend, or is it actually into the wetlands itself?
I believe it's in the buffer.
Okay. All right, I think I have, did I see our engineer?
Yeah, we've been there.
He poked in here. So we're looking to get we need an application for a wetlands permit. Dan, give us a high level on this, that, this is Dan Ciarcia, he's our town engineer. Hi, Dan.
Good evening. So the scope of the project is not a big deal.
Okay.
I mean, it's a deck, but our code is pretty explicit about it, that if it's within the bounds of a state wetlands or a state wetlands buffer, it's no longer under my jurisdiction, and that I can do as an administrative permit. So based upon the DEC environmental mapping, it doesn't appear to be in the wetlands, but it does appear to be, it should be within the 100-foot buffer that the state regulates.
Right.
And it clearly appears like in the states, you can't take it to the bank. They have their statewide mapping of wetlands. So at a minimum, the whole property appears in the check zone. So I can't handle it as an administrative permit, so that's why it's before you. But one of the conditions will also have to be that the applicant has to go to the DEC because it would appear that they definitely are in the buffer and therefore fall within the authority of the DEC for permitting. But like I say, it's not a big deal, but because of where it sits with respect to the state wetlands, it becomes a process.
Right, it's just the post basically going in the ground for the
Yeah.
deck, right? So, all right, so we have to, the next step for them then would be to go to the DEC and come back with that permit, and then we could do an
Right,
administrative on
and
this
then
end.
the town board would issue the permit.
Permit, right.
And that would be one of the conditions. And like I say, otherwise, this project is not a big deal.
And then we refer it out and do a public hearing at that point, or we just do a public hearing?
I don't even know if we have to do a public hearing. I mean, we'll,
So wetlands permit, so we should refer it out and do a public hearing.
Yeah.
okay.
So, all right, so go forth and talk to the DEC and go from there, and then we'll refer it out and do a public hearing for you.
Do you have to wait to refer it?
Do you want to refer it out simultaneously?
Yeah, we could do
Yeah.
that. Yeah, let's refer it out simultaneously, and we'll go
Yeah,
from
might
there.
as well
This
get
way,
it-
you
might
can
as well
get your
get it
stuff
moving.
started, we'll get our stuff started, and hopefully they'll all meet together. All right?
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
I'll make a motion to
Have a good
refer it
evening.
out.
Okay, can I have a motion?
So moved?
Second? To refer
Second.
it out? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay.
How this works.
Okay, we have
That's good. Nice job.
We have Ken Belfer. I want to know what hat he has on today. I think it's the Mohegan Lake.
There?
I have the shirt on to identify which hat I'm wearing tonight, but
Just, we'll be
Uh,
ready for you in a minute.
it's going to be, the first part of this is going to be a presentation by Weston and Sampson, an engineering firm that we hired under a DEC planning grant to study stormwater phosphorus mitigation, and they're nearing the end of their contract and in the process of producing their final results. And so the purpose of tonight is for them to produce, to share a lot of what they've done, so that input could be given by the town board, town engineer, town highway superintendent, so that they can finalize things. And after their presentation, I'll be back up again with the Mohegan Lake Improvement District
Okay.
presentation.
The highway superintendent couldn't be here tonight. He's under the weather, so we will go from there. But we have a Zoom presentation from our insurance, our engineering firm for this, Weston and Sampson.
Okay, Joe.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, Joe.
I'm Joe Zongle here with Weston Sampson. Not here to sell you insurance. I wasn't prepared with that. So
Yeah, sorry about that.
no worries, no worries.
Is
I'm
that is
called
that the B job? Your insurance sales?
You got to always have a plan B.
That's right.
As Ken mentioned in his introduction, I do have a presentation here. I'll look to share my screen. And let's see, let me go to full presentation mode. All right, is everybody able to see that?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. So I appreciate everybody taking some time to allow us to present this project. We've been working with Ken, seems like for a long time in this project, once we got the funding squared away. But this is an important project for the Lake Mohegan Water District. And I'd like to go through basically the purpose of the project, how we approached it, the different steps that go into the analysis, prioritization of different projects that we're looking to identify as part of this, some of the practices that we'll recommend as part of this study, and then a final deliverable, which is our report that's going to include basically a lot more detail than what we're going to cover tonight. I want to really talk about this in a high level, just so everybody has an understanding of the purpose of the project and how we went doing this. We'll put this together in a final report, which will include a lot more detailed information. So let me start from the beginning here, the purpose of the project. So Lake Mohegan, as you can see in this graphic over here, it's a Class B watershed. So everybody on the board, I'm sure, is familiar with it. So Class B water, for those of you that aren't aware, are basically primary and secondary contact recreation and fishing. So it's a classification that the DEC holds for different water bodies. So this was listed on the Section 303D list of impaired watersheds for phosphorus since 2010. The DEC actually wrote an entire chapter in the Stormwater Management Manual for enhanced phosphorus removal, primarily stemming out of the East of Hudson projects, the enhanced phosphorus removal for the watershed feeding into New York City's reservoirs. Phosphorus leads to eutrophication, leading to blue-green algae blooms and excessive plant growth within the lake. So that's what we're trying to look to help to stem that growth. In-lake management attempts have addressed internal loading so far. They haven't been fully sufficient, so we're looking to put in some practices that can reduce the overall loading to the lake. This is mostly borne by stormwater, by first flush of a stormwater event, which I'll get into a little bit later as to what that means. And this project was funded by a grant that was received by the New York State DEC. Green infrastructure. So green infrastructure is kind of the wave of the future. It's a buzzword that you hear, but there's a lot of different benefits to it. They're mostly passive in nature. They're where they don't have machinery. There's no mechanicals. So it's a passive system where the storm event occurs and then they operate naturally. Nature-based solutions, they provide treatment of different contaminants, including phosphorus, nitrogen, and other pollutants. These also provide public education opportunities. We've actually done some stormwater infrastructure projects. One in particular was funded also through DEC for the city of Watervliet. We were put in a number of different green infrastructure things down Main Street, and we had different educational placards and signs explaining how a bioretention system works, a rain garden, and they were able to actually leverage some grant funding for educational purposes. There's also, obviously, the purpose of this is phosphorus removal. Potential phosphorus inputs include fertilizer use. So we'll have some recommendations if the town doesn't already, but I believe there are restrictions on phosphorus-laden fertilizers, waterfowl wastes, and then failing septic systems. So that's something that will certainly need to be addressed as I know the community has grown over the years. There are probably still some homes still on septic. I haven't had a chance to look at the sewer maps, but that'll be something that we'll want to recommend to investigate as well. But for the purpose of this, we're focused on stormwater. So our approach to addressing this project, we collected a lot of existing information. So the town of Yorktown had GIS data. We made some mapping updates, and we've been able to share that with Ken and his team to try to create an interactive mapping of the stormwater collection systems that provide the different drainage sheds. We've labeled the catch basins, the pipes to the best of our ability, and the discharge points. Also overlaying that with contour, property lines, and different other layers such as houses or other hardscapes within the areas. So that'll be a tool that the town can use not only for these types of projects, but anything else moving forward. The way that phosphorus loading calculations are done, we use what's called the SIPL method. This was used for a lot of the East of Hudson watershed projects. This was basically, I call it like a cookbook type of a program where there's a set equation that basically balances, it figures out your annual loading in kilograms per year or pounds per year of phosphorus, and it's based off of the runoff, the type of pollutant, the contributing area, and the land cover type. So you'll see that in the table on the bottom right, that different land uses have different phosphorus concentrations, and this was done by bench testing that's been conducted over a series of years to develop these coefficients. So these are used essentially as an average, or what you would expect to see in these types of land covers. So you'll see that residential is a 0.41, impervious, which would be your hardscapes, your roadways, your driveways, your pavers, rooftops, is going to be a 0.5. Commercial applications, industrial, actively grazed pastures, and then you see that forests and developed open forests have the lowest, as you would expect, lowest phosphorus ratings. So the land use within the Mohegan Lake watershed. So you can see that the total area that we evaluated for this project, it's over 562 acres. We've broken it down based on percentages. So looking at this, you've got developed open space, you've got 38%, forest is 37%, and then there's a smaller distribution between the impervious and the residential. So land use by catchment area. So the land use categories were converted basically using the GIS information. We were able to characterize the drainage areas and then put them in the proper classification based off of their land use. We had a local staff member who's familiar with the area drive around to do field confirmations, and then the rest of it was a desktop study. We used the weighted pollutant concentration, which was calculated using the land use data. So you can see here that there's a breakdown between the commercial, the developed open land, the forest, the impervious, the industrial, the residential, and the resulting total acreage. And then what we did was we characterized each one of these by a catchment area, which has an associated discharge point into the lake. So there are about 34 different discharge points into the lake.
So I just have a quick question, Joe.
Though, the biggest number you're going to see is overland. So overland drainage is anything that doesn't get channelized into a drainage system. So this is typically going to be your residential use or your open fields that are just going to drain directly into the lake. You see that's 168 acres. So there's a lot of that's going to be very difficult to treat. So those areas weren't looked at as part of the study. Most of it's in private property, and the focus of the studies on doing projects that would be within public lands. To capture that runoff on overland would be difficult. You'd have to do swales, you'd have to put in drainage collection systems, you'd have to get easements. It would be a very onerous process. So we really wanted to target what we're calling low-hanging fruit, get the discharge points for some of these municipal discharge locations and put the treatment practices there.
Joe, can I ask
So
a question?
Hold on one
Yes.
second, Joe.
Can I ask him a question? Joe, can I ask you a question? I don't know if you can hear me, which is shocking.
Yeah. Yep.
Because everybody can hear me. So I was just paying attention, and I just looked up for the phosphorus. I do know that when I used to put in like some sort of drainage or catch basins and whatnot, I'd also have to understand how fast the discharge was going, because like certain municipalities in Westchester County have more clay in their water or iron in their water or whatnot. So when it comes to this, does that play, like if there's a really big discharge or there's a really big rainfall, like does it play parts in this calculation?
So the magnitude of the rainfall,
Because of all the discharge that happens, you're going to get different types of levels of sediments depending if you're in the woods or well, like what's
Correct.
drinking up the
Correct.
water, like
So-
what's not. So,
So the way that these systems are sized, and I'm going to get to that
oh, I'm sorry.
calculation if I haven't, but I can certainly address that now just so I don't forget and I don't make sure I don't miss that detail. So
Thanks,
the
Joe.
systems are sized for what's called the water quality volume, which is 90% of the 1-year storm. So you might have heard the
Yep.
terminology of a 1-year storm, a 10-year storm, a 100-year storm. We've been hearing that a lot lately. So that's
Bless you.
the storm event that happens every 100 years is the 100-year storm event. So the way that these systems are sized are for 90% of the 1-year storm, which is a more frequent storm. And the concept behind these systems is to be able to provide treatment for what they call the first flush. So the theory behind it and what happens is the phosphorus sitting at surface. You get your initial rainfall, you get the first water that's going in the collection system. That's going to be your phosphorus laden loading. So these systems are designed to handle those smaller storm events, and then they will bypass anything beyond that, because everything beyond that in a larger storm event is considered to be highly diluted at that point.
Got it. Because the phosphorus are going to come from that first push, and then after that, it's just the residual water. Understood.
Exactly.
Thank you, Joe. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Absolutely. So we figured out the impervious cover fraction. So this goes into the calculations. I don't really want to bore everybody with how this works. This impervious cover fraction within the DEC design manual. There's percentages or there's ranges that are provided. So we use the DEC ranges for impervious, for example. Obviously, impervious is going to be 100% impervious. Residential ranges somewhere between 22 and 25. We actually did a weighted average based off of the different drainage areas within these specific watersheds. For the other categories, which were less prevalent, we used the average within the book, within the stormwater manual. Changing them 1% or 2% doesn't make a significant impact, but we wanted to make sure that the residential, since it was such a substantial component, we used real data based off of the GIS information. So we've got the Lake Mohegan draft outfall map PDF, which we'll be providing. The town of Yorktown has 15 catchments that discharge directly to the lake, so these are public catchments. 7 of them are discharging to upstream wetland areas or streams. These upstream wetland areas and streams then discharge into the lake. So it's essentially a water body that's upstream. Within the drainage area, there's actually a few of them that are within the town of Cortland. There's 5 of them that are discharging upstream to upstream wetlands and areas and streams. So we've looked at those. Those you'd need to have some agreements with the town of Cortland for how to manage those, so it gets a little bit tricky. There's also 2 catchment areas that are discharging from the lake from private infrastructure, and 5 that are into upstream wetland areas and streams that are private infrastructure. So those would have to be worked out through easement agreements for how to go ahead and treat those. So again, implementation of those practices could take time. They could be costly. It depends on how willing of a partner the private landowner is. Things like that. Jumping ahead in the report, we're going to provide some best management practices, and one of the recommendations will be to include in some of the regulations for development consideration of phosphorus removal as part of building permits. So on a new site development, this is a way to try to capture some of the phosphorus removal for future private development. Phosphorus loading results. So this kind of gets into, what are all these calculations that we're doing? What does this actually tell us, right? So you're taking your land covers, which have certain amounts of phosphorus. You've got the water that's being generated from that, and the total annual load that we've calculated based off of the land cover type and the catchment areas is 473.48 pounds per year. But who's counting? It's probably a little bit too specific of a decimal there, but you're around 475 pounds per year of phosphorus that's being loaded on average. The total annual phosphorus load, less the overland areas, is 370 pounds per year. And that's really the number we want to focus on, because like I said, the difference between the 100 pounds a year is going to be very difficult to try to capture. So you're going to get more bang for your buck by focusing on the non-overland areas. And I know there's a lot of information in these tables, so rest assured these are going to be included within the report. And I think for the purpose of this presentation, I won't bore everybody to death by getting into all the specifics. But if you do have questions, feel free to jump in. So now that we've figured out the land cover type, we've figured out how much phosphorus is being produced, the next step is to take the different green infrastructure practices and try to make a good match based on the loading that we're seeing, the existing infrastructure that's available, the land that's available, the topography, all those considerations. And within the stormwater manual, as part of the bench testing, they've listed, the DEC has listed all of the different retrofit types. And the associated retrofit type then has a phosphorus reduction percentage. So really what we're trying to do is take a practice that has the highest phosphorus removal and match it to an area that has the highest phosphorus generation, which, you know, logically makes sense. Now, there's a couple of these that we didn't include within our consideration based on coordination with Ken and his staff, and based on some of our own experience, mainly because they're either too cost prohibitive to do, where, you know, it might show that it's the same amount of removal as another practice, but we just know it's going to cost twice as much, or it causes a maintenance or a safety issue. So one of those that we've excluded, you'll see is about 2/3 of the way down, the underground sand filter, which has a 59% phosphorus reduction. Well, the underground sand filter is a massive either corrugated metal pipe, so you're talking like a 4-foot diameter, 5-6 foot diameter pipe, or a precast concrete structure that has a sand filter built within it, and the sand needs to get changed out on like an annual basis, and it requires confined space entry and things like that. So it's something that's either never going to get maintained, or the DPW is going to curse us out every time we have to do it, and it causes safety issues for the workers, not to mention the cost of a structure like that. So we would look at something like a surface sand filter instead, or a different practice like an infiltration trench that would provide the same or better removal. In reviewing the area, there's actually a few existing practices that are in place. So in 3 of the catchments, there's catch basin inserts, which are basically systems that get dropped in existing catch basins. It's a filtration sack, essentially. They do require maintenance, but it's a pretty easy installation, and it's pretty cost effective as long as there's upkeep that's maintained. When they get clogged, that's when there becomes issues and you could have flooding. So we do want to caution on that regular maintenance is key to that. Anybody that's been around a construction site, if you see when the construction workers put the silt fence or the fabric over the catch basin grate and they ignore it, and then you see that it gets flooded, that's exactly what could happen in this case. Evaluation criteria for the project prioritization. So we estimated the phosphorus loading in the catchment area. We considered the land ownership, as I've mentioned a few times already, open space. So some of these practices take up room. You know, if you're looking at a pond, there's certain criteria that need to be met to have it work efficiently, and I'll get in a little bit more detail in a moment on that. Permitting difficulty. So if it's going to take you 5 years to get a permit, that's probably not the best way to go about it, especially if it's going to be more costly in the end. Maintenance frequency. So we certainly want to make sure that it's something that can be performed by town staff. There are some proprietary practices out there that might need maintenance by a specialty contractor. We didn't discard those, but we try to stay away from that just because you can get locked into a service agreement. There's other complications that go along with that. And then the maintenance effort that goes into it. We know that DPW and highway workers are busy normally, so adding something else to their plate is usually not something they're looking for. So we try to make this as painless as possible. So we ranked the phosphorus loading areas. So we had to basically take the highest phosphorus loaded areas and then identify whether there's an opportunity to put a green practice in, because some of them there weren't for some, based on some of the other factors that I just mentioned about ownership, land area, things like that. We know that some areas had some erosion issues and flooding issues. We didn't want to make a bad situation worse. So those types of considerations went into play. So we're looking at a a number of different catchment areas that we're going to be identifying here. So based on these 7 different catchment areas, we're looking at a combination of different technologies such as wet swale, bioretention areas, which are basically rain gardens that are larger rain gardens, cartridge filter installations, which are typically cheaper to install, or they're pretty quick hitters to do. They don't require a lot of upfront planning as some of these other projects would, such as bioretention. And then you can see the phosphorus reduction range. So the reason that we have a range on a couple of these is because there's an opportunity to either put in a wet swale or a wet pond or a bioretention area. And it really is going to come down to taking a detailed look to the area, identifying some of the challenges, and seeing what can fit to the site. So ideally, you'd want to pick the higher removal technology, but if it's not feasible, then there's an option there to at least get some. So to get some removal. So you're looking at 73 to 85 pounds per year reduction. Taking that off of the overland number, which was 370, that's about a 20 to 22% reduction in phosphorus loading to the lake. If you wanted to look at the whole number, which was about 470, you're somewhere in the 12 to 15% overall phosphorus removable loading into the lake by addressing these 7 discharge points. So getting into a little bit more detail for those that are unfamiliar with different green infrastructure practices. So a wet swale, you can see on the left, basically you have an inlet pipe. So a lot of these systems are really benefited by having an existing collection system upstream of catch basins and pipes. You're going to have a stabilized inlet that's going to go through a check dam, and a pre-treatment area is just in front of that, so that's the area that gets maintained. And then the swale is going to widen for the water to get shallower, and really the purpose of that is to promote infiltration to the ground. Anytime that we can get infiltration, that's really the best practice for removing phosphorus. This does stay, as the name implies, it does stay wet, so you're not going to want to run this through. For example, they won't be happy when it comes to that. A wet pond, so everybody, not to insult anybody's intelligence, everybody knows what a pond is. There are some DEC criteria though for designing these, so it's a little bit more than just a hole in the ground. For ponds, you need to have a pre-treatment area. So pre-treatment needs to be 25% of the pond volume. And then there's a weir, there's an overflow and a divider. You can see the stabilized overflow that's shown there. So basically the intent is for any of your floatables, your solids, your larger particulates to settle out into the pre-treatment zone. And then the water is then going to filter into the primary pond area. There's also requirements for benching and grading, so it can't just be a very deep hole in the ground. Basically, you need to establish an aquatic bench. An aquatic bench is where there are specific plants that have to go in. A lot of the phosphorus removal is based on putting the proper plantings in place where the roots actually absorb the phosphorus and use that as a nutrient for growth. So that's where you get a lot of the removals. So there's specific plants. You need to have a specific grading plan to that. So that's why this one is a good practice to implement. However, there are a lot of restrictions that need to be analyzed, including the topography and the available open land. Safety is also a consideration. So I've had some personal experience doing a few projects in Mayapack where we put some ponds on some school sites, and we had to fence those in, put protective barriers around it, put shrubs around it so kids don't see it. You don't want elementary school kids playing in these types of ponds. So just things to keep in mind. Cartridge filter systems, so these are more proprietary type devices. They come pre-manufactured. This example is from Fabco, but there's some other vendors out there. Basically, these get connected within an existing collection system. So you're going to intercept the collection system. You're going to have an inlet pipe and then the outlet pipe, and the water gets forced through the filtration system. So it flows through it and then back up, and then the filters need to get changed on a regular basis. Typically, it's an annual basis, but it's going to depend on the loading. So it'll probably take a year or two to develop a maintenance schedule. Organic filters. So basically these They have there's a couple of different options here. So there's the jellyfish, which is another, which is by Contech. This is a filter. This is a man-made filter system, again, that uses the natural hydraulics of the area. So having enough slope and elevation differential is key. There's another one that's essentially that functions very similar, but it's essentially a tree in a box. They put a precast structure. They put a special tree that's designated for enhanced phosphorus removal, so the water will go into the catch basin, as you're seeing in the diagram on the right, and then it flows through. There's a special soil media that's specified, particular tree that they put in there. The tree, the soil functions as a filter. The tree takes up the phosphorus, and then there's an overflow beneath that goes to discharge. So this is really good for things like downtown streetscapes and things like that, where you want to integrate that into the, into the downtown area. It's visually appealing, but it also provides a practical purpose. You've got bioretention areas. So bioretention areas are essentially the same thing as rain gardens, except they're bigger. You're going to have a high-level overflow. You're going to have an underdrain. So you can see that, again, it's special plantings that get put in the top. You're going to have a section that's going to maintain water or stay wet for basically the duration. You're going to have special filter media, which is different types of sands that get placed in there. It's more of a peat mixture that gets put in there. And then there's separated by fabric and stone for an underdrain collection system. So the idea is for it to retain water for about a 24 to 48 hour period, and then it's going to discharge out the pipe. So it does maintain moisture in these areas, but it's not meant to overflow. Typically on almost all, depending on the design, but most of these practices, you're going to have a structure upstream that's going to be a diversion structure. Getting back to your original question, so it's basically a manhole that's going to have a weir, which is a wall, and it's going to have the low pipe is going to be sized to take the first flush, and then there'll be a pipe with a higher elevation that will divert the water past whatever this practice is to the original discharge point. So it's basically a bypass for the system. So when you get the 10-year storm, you capture the first flush, and then you're not washing away the bioretention area. You don't want to erode it and wash away all the work that you've done. So I've covered a lot of ground here. I wanted to basically wrap up this in giving you a summary of what to expect in the report. So the report is going to kind of follow the same type of process that I followed here. So we're going to discuss the project purpose, go through some of the literature that was used to develop our methodology. We're going to get into a lot more detail on the pollutant loading methodology, what was used, what the results were, where the areas are to look at. So then we're going to prioritize the projects. We're going to have maps that are going to have the conceptual layouts, the configurations. We're also going to include a list of next steps and considerations. So it'll list different field testing that might need to be done. You might have to do survey to verify, apologize, quick trigger finger there. A topographic survey or a property boundary survey to confirm that you're within property boundaries. Soil analysis, that could be deep tests with an excavator to make sure that you've got separation from rock and groundwater. Percolation tests to make sure the groundwater or the ground can absorb it. If you do run into groundwater or it doesn't have good perk, you could put liners at the bottom of ponds. So there are ways around it, but you would need to know that for whoever's doing the detailed design for the implementation. Checking of easements. So there's going to be a whole host of things that we will spell out in the report for each one of these areas to consider as you go through the decision-making process. So we're not just going to say, hey, here's a pond, go ahead and build it, and then you won't have an idea of really what the next steps are. We find that's important. Green infrastructure operation and maintenance, so we'll provide some recommendations on how it gets maintained so you can make informed decisions as well. And then we'll go through the implementation steps. And then we're also going to include some best management practices. So as I mentioned, the septic systems, talk about investigating if there are septic systems, can you convert them to sewer? If you have fertilizer restrictions through certain months of the year, perhaps they can be enhanced. Perhaps if they're not in place, then that's something the town board should look into putting in place to reduce some of the phosphorus loading. putting in different statutes. I'm drawing a blank on the word here. Basically, different regulations on new development to make sure that enhanced phosphorus removal, Chapter 10 of the Stormwater Management Report, is being considered as part of the development for a new subdivision or a new house or whatever the structure might be. So we're going to include all those recommendations, not only for the implementation of these projects, but to help decrease the overall phosphorus loading moving forward. And that concludes my presentation. I know I threw a lot of information out there at you, so I am open for questions.
So once that first flush of phosphorus comes in, goes to the bottom of that particular sediment containment, is it of solid nature or is it of liquefied nature at that point?
Yeah, it'll absorb into the ground. It'll actually precipitate out into a solid, and then it'll absorb into the ground.
Okay, so it actually sits down there and just kind of dries out,
Yep.
so to speak.
Right.
And then is actually expelled with the next first flush, per se.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then a lot of these, it gets like I said, the plant life and things like that actually absorb the phosphorus, so it's taken out through natural means.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I have. Ken?
If there are no further questions, then we can let Joe go, and we can go on to Part B of this.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. I appreciate everybody's time. Have a great evening.
Thanks for my notes.
Thank you.
I'm gonna be Googling a lot. Big words.
All you got to do is ask this guy standing over here. You don't have to Google anything.
He's Google.
That's Google right there.
If you see a voucher for a new pair of shoes, it's because of the wear from walking around all around the Mohegan Lake roads, looking at the infrastructure, the catch basins, and the pipes that flow out into the lake. So this has been a joint effort. There are at least two people in the audience, Felicity, raise your hand, and Stacy, who have done a little bit of that walking as well to identify some of the stormwater infrastructure that exists.
Ken, just before you get started, when we redid the wall, wasn't there a structure put in of some type to mitigate some of this at that point in time?
Yes. So the good news is that it's either 9 or 10 catch basins got catch basin inserts with cartridges in them that were made by Fabco, which was the example that he used and that's been used in a number of the East of Hudson projects.
I was going to say that was East of Hudson with, what's the gentleman's name that comes
The
in and gives
engineer there.
Dan.
The bad news is that they need to be maintained, and when we went to do the maintenance, that's when the town didn't have a vac truck and things got delayed. So
You have one now.
yes, so by next spring, I'll be talking to Dave Paganelli about this, but by next spring, we need to clean out all of those catch basins and replace the cartridges.
Okay.
Okay, so Diana, if you could move us through, I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. I don't need to tell you about the lake, but just it's about a mile long, average depth about 11.5 feet, and there's 7 active beaches around the lake. Next. And the Mohegan Lake Improvement District was formed in 1975 by the residents around the lake. We have approximately 1,800 tax parcels in the district, most in Yorktown, but about 260 of them are in Cortland. So taxes are collected from both towns. And as was pointed out in the presentation, Cortland's going to have a foot in the game related to what needs to be done because catch basins.
They
on
said 5 of them or something.
Yeah, on Lexington Avenue, pretty much is what we're talking about. But there's areas from the other side of Lexington Avenue that slopes down to Lexington and then come into the Yorktown side of. So there's runoff from Cortland coming into Mohegan Lake. Next, I'm going to just skip telling you about what Mohegan Lake Improvement District does, because I think most of you know it. I'll just say the bottom left picture is a lake gauge, a stick gauge that we installed last year about this time, and we use that to monitor lake level. It's right there off of Mohegan Avenue by the outlet, and I could testify from doing my weekly look at lake level today that the lake has gone up a few inches just in the last week. But there's no flooding on Mohegan Avenue. Thank you, Dave Paganelli and the Highway Department, for your work. Next.
One question I had, the top right picture there, Diana, can you go back? I think that's P.J. Kaminsky that's carrying gravel onto that path there. Is that him?
It might be.
Okay.
I don't know if it was.
Yeah, he told us all about it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, he was one of the people that worked on the steps. We added another section to Tall Timbers
Yeah,
Trail.
we'd know those legs anywhere, you know.
Okay, next. So this is what we're going to cover. We're going to review this year. We're going to talk about our plans for next year, long-term goals, and what we need from the town. Next. This year was year 13 of an eradication program for water chestnut. It basically means hand pulling them out of the lake, and I'm very pleased to say that they were very hard to find this year. So we've won the battle, but it's not over completely. There'll still be a few more years of work. When we started, it seemed like an impossible task, but now it's pretty much under control. Another thing, something new that we started this year, we have an overpopulation of Canada geese. And someone who studied the lake indicated that the waterfowl, such as the Canada geese, contribute up to 5% of the summer phosphorus load in the lake.
Makes sense.
So they're taking plant life, aquatic plant life in the lake that's actually gotten phosphorus from the sediment and is holding it in the plants during the summer, which is good because then it's not feeding algae. But they're eating the plants, digesting them, and spewing out the
residuals.
So what you see in that picture, and it's you'd have to zoom in, but on the dock, geese had made a nest.
You guys you have your own pooper scooper?
No, but Stacy is on the dock with an umbrella. Stacy, raise your hand. Randall's in a kayak or canoe right next to Randall. Raise your hand next to her. And Laura, who's couldn't be here tonight, is in the kayak with the umbrella. The umbrellas are to fend off the geese, but the process, it's oiling.
What do you mean?
It's oiling the eggs. And we only identified the one nest this year. It was our first year trying. It's a permit through U.S. Department of Agriculture, I think. But you have to test the eggs. You drop them put them in a bucket of water. That's the orange bucket you see, and determine if they sink or float. And if they're too far along in development, you're not allowed to do anything other than put them back in the nest. But if they're not too far along in development, you coat them with some vegetable oil, and then they'll never hatch. The goose won't know that, so they'll sit on the eggs, and then they'll find that they don't they don't raise any young successfully, so they usually decide to go somewhere else because this hasn't been a good place for them to raise young. Whereas if you take the eggs away...
Sorry, the therapist in me feels very hurt right now.
If you take the eggs away, they then just lay more.
Yeah.
But anyway, this has been something that's known to discourage,
So I built a lot of pools, not lakes, in Mamaroneck, and we get an insane amount of geese. And one of the things that would happen is if there was a house being turned over on the water, they would have these automatic sprinklers. So I would be doing a walkthrough and I'd get sprayed in my face, and it was for the geese. So it was like this automatic way of preventing them. Maybe we should get sprinklers.
So this area is over by the condos off of Route 6, and that's where a lot of the geese congregate. I counted 63 of them a few weeks ago when I was out on the lake. Next slide. So this year, as in many, many years, the lake was treated with a copper product. We used EarthTech, 7 treatments, about $4,100 a treatment. With permitting costs and DC fees, it was over $34,000 for the year. But if we, in the past, if we didn't do that, we couldn't keep the lake swimmable and the aesthetics would become terrible. Next. Health Department beach closures. We've had them almost every year since the Health Department started closing beaches for blue-green algae. You see the dates. Our beaches were closed in 2022. Guess what? We didn't have any closures in 2023, so we were very pleased about that. We installed a new aeration system this year, which you're probably all familiar with. Total cost, we came in $7,000 under budget. Work started June 14th, was completed July 12th. To save money, we had decided we would demolish the old system ourselves. So you see some of our summer MLID staff in the right. We took out something like 5 tons of airline from the old system.
Wow.
And that was on the left picture, is taking down the aeration shed. Next. This is what the aeration system consists of. Microporous diffusers. There are 43 of them throughout the lake. Next. Two manifolds. Next. And 2 different aeration sheds. The one on the left, that's a gentleman from Hanover Electric connecting the electricity. It was newly built with an extreme amount of soundproofing in every aspect of the airflow through the shed.
Got the electric done.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that well. Next. And 2 compressors, one in each shed. A 30 horsepower, which isn't the one with all the soundproofing. It's a monster. It weighed close to 700 pounds. It was interesting seeing them get it into the shed. And a 7.5 horsepower in the second shed. Next. And over 10 miles of self-sinking airline. Next. This was from Lake Day, the ribbon cutting on the new aeration system in July. And of course, it was made possible partly by $100,000 from the state that Senator Harkam secured for us. Next. So this is not meant to describe the personality of our current town supervisor. What Just Bubbles is meant to say is that that's all you see in the lake. Everything else, other than the 2 aeration sheds, everything else is underwater, 10 to 18 feet down, and that's all you see is what's in that circle there. You see some bubbles on the water when the system is operating. Next.
You can see Bubbles isn't on the water there.
With a fully oxygenated water column, theoretically, you get less release of phosphorus from the lake bottom sediment, the phosphorus that's already in the lake. You get more decomposition of the lake bottom muck by bacteria, and you should get an improved ratio between healthy green algae and unhealthy blue-green algae. So next. So I want to walk you through a little bit about what actually happened with this, what was a huge investment for us in Mohegan Lake, and that we spent a good part of our fund balance on. We partnered with Dr. Gregory Boyer from State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. We convinced him to do a study with us on the impact of the aeration system. And he got a grant from the New York State Center of Excellence in Healthy Water Solutions to help cover that study. And there were 3 things that we wanted to find out. Are we, in fact, improving the oxygen levels from the surface to the lake bottom? What's happening with the amount of algae, and particularly blue-green algae, harmful blooms? And what's happening with toxins related to the algae? Next. We got a monitoring buoy that we picked up from SUNY and brought down and deployed. We just delivered it back a week ago, so now to Syracuse, and now we're waiting as they download the results. Next, and that buoy had sensors going from near the top of the water down to the bottom that were measuring temperature and oxygen levels. We can go on to the next one. This is what we were doing once a week as part of that study. You see Felicity on the right and Laura. This was November 21st, and I have to say it was getting pretty cold the last few weeks of our work on the lake. And that's Jeff, the MLID staff, and the MLID John boat. Next. And this was a sampling map with GPS coordinates for the 8 sites that we sampled on the lake, and there was an additional site we did sampling that was off of shore. Next. So this is really what was going on. Before the aeration system, and this was June 28th, we took these dissolved oxygen measurements. And what you see, this doesn't work. What you see on the left side where it says healthy levels of oxygen, it's all above 4 milligrams per liter is what's considered healthy. And on the right side, you see what's below 4 milligrams per liter. And when you reach about 6 feet deep, you start dropping off of a cliff on oxygen levels. And by about 8 feet deep, you're already crossing below healthy levels. Given that the lake is average depth of 11.5, 12 feet, that meant that a good part of the lake, most of the lake really, the lake bottom suffered from no oxygen. And when you got down to 10 feet in this, you're basically at 0 amounts of oxygen at the sediment. Next. July 12th, the system was fully operational, and here's July 19th, a week later. And what you see here is we now have very healthy levels of oxygen all the way down to 16 feet deep, but we still had unhealthy levels between 16 and 18 feet. Next. And here, this slide is a comparison between that June 28th pre-aeration and August 2nd post-aeration. The green line is showing the amount of oxygen from 1 feet deep to 18 feet deep. And you see that it's virtually the same. It's just, we were blown away when we first saw these numbers in July, and it meant that the system was doing what the contractor told us it was going to do. Next.
Imagine that.
So, in addition to studying the dissolved oxygen as part of this SUNY study, we were taking water samples for a week and sending them up to their laboratory in Syracuse. Next, we were given a microscope, and we would take one of the samples and filter it and concentrate it and look at it under the microscope and send them the pictures as well for this as part of this study. And we were looking ourselves at some of the variations between the species. So on the upper left, you see October of 2022 and what we saw in the water. And what you're seeing there is predominantly blue-green algae. All those dark dots, as well as the little squiggly things, are blue-green algae. The bottom right is October 17th of this year, and most of what you're seeing is healthy types of algae.
Oh, it's wonderful.
So it was very interesting watching this over the summer. Did we have blue-green algae?
Sure.
We did. We continued to have it, sometimes in amounts that were more than we would have wanted, but we also had a lot more healthy algae than we ever did.
And you didn't get shut down.
And we didn't get shut down, but why, I'm not sure. This is the report we have for each week. We did the water samples. This is what they would send us back. They would tell us the amount of the abundance of blue-green algae and the presence of toxins. Next. So I just ran a couple of quick graphs. This is blue-green algae abundance, and there are only 2 weeks in the beginning of August when it reached a level that would be considered high. Most of the rest of the time it was low or moderate.
Were those like super hot days or super?
We're going to have to cross-reference
we should
all
look
of
into
this,
it.
but that's the
Lots
heat
of rain.
The beginning of August is the heat of the summer. Yeah. Next. Now, this is an important one. We looked at the toxins in the lake, and they tested for 3 different toxins. I'm just showing microcystin here, and the reason I'm showing that is the other 2 that they tested for, they did not find anything that was at a measurable limit at all. Under 1, and all this is under 1, is considered non-detectable level, which is good news. And on the tests that we did ourselves, because we did some ourselves, just got undetectable as our results. They have a much more sophisticated test where they get the actual micrograms per liter down to a very, very small fraction. The green line at the bottom is the United States EPA drinking water standards. Now, this isn't for a lake for swimming. This is drinking water standards. That's the green line. That's 0.3 micrograms per liter. The red line, and that's the drinking water standards for children. The red line is drinking water standards for adults.
Yeah, I think we're good.
And the line for recreational use of a lake, the state sets it at 4. I think US EPA sets it at 8. Those numbers would both be way off the top of this chart. But yes, we were very pleased with those results.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
On the toxins. Next. So, preliminary conclusions from that study. We had better than average water quality in 2023. Whether that's coincidence or not is hard to say. Blue-green algae was still present, but there was an increased amount of healthy green algae. Toxins were measured at safe levels. But as a caution, you can't really draw conclusions from 1 year because weather, rainfall, temperature, there are many factors that can impact all these. Next. Just a few other things we did, and then I'll get on to moving toward the future. We met with the county health department to discuss beach closures and to show them the results of some of our studies of toxins and let them know what we were doing at the lake. And we've had 2 recent meetings, one in September, one in November, with DEC. We had successfully gotten Mohegan as a pilot project for the state, because the state is grappling with blue-green algae for lakes all over the state. And we had said, look, you're crazy not testing inactivating phosphorus in lakes, and there are tools to do it, and almost every state in the United States allows them. So we got them to do a pilot project on Mohegan Lake, and they included Peach Lake in that as well. This was in 2019. Unfortunately, they dosed it at such a low level that it was completely ineffective. Yeah. And they had up until now refused to release any information about it. So we pushed them. Senator Harckham actually set up these 2 meetings. And at September 5th, it was the same story. We're not prepared to release the information. We're still studying it. Well, this is 2019. Come on, you've got the data. Release it. So November 2nd, they released it, and they basically acknowledged, we
didn't dose it right.
We underdosed. We could see the impact, and it was way too small. So we've learned from that. And now we're studying another lake. Well, guess what? This was Honeoye, one of the Finger Lakes, and they treated that a year ago. They grossly underdosed that, about 25% of the dose needed. And they admitted that in this meeting. Anyway, next.
Sounds like the state.
So one of the issues is that New York State interprets its environmental conservation law, and I won't go into the details, it's crazy, but as not allowing nutrient inactivation. So finally, I've been fed up for a long time, but finally Senator Harckham saw this in the 2 meetings and said, and agreed with our recommendation, let's change the legislation and specifically make it legal in New York. So we've been working on legislation. I reviewed a final draft about a week ago, and I'm hoping it will be introduced in the new year. I'm sure we'll have Assemblyman Slater on board, and I've spoken with 2 other assemblymen as well.
Great.
So I'm hoping we're going to change things so that lakes all over the state, including ours, can use products such as alum to inactivate phosphorus. We heard about the DEC grant and the study. That was what the previous presentation was. And last of all, we're working on next year bacteria. We basically want to do probiotics for the lake.
I was just gonna say I feel like we're talking about prebiotics and probiotics for the
Yeah.
lake water.
Yeah.
I was totally like, this
So-
is in my cabinet.
Now,
This is we got
DC doesn't understand it, so they're very leery about it. They did not approve a permit for Lake Peekskill last
We
year.
got to teach them gut health, and then maybe they'll get it.
They've agreed to meet with us, and we're going to do a presentation of them and try to convince them. And I'm also trying to get a university on board to study that when we do it next year, which we hope to do next.
It's great, Ken.
So we hope to test biological treatments now that we have an oxygenated lake. We'll do the normal things we do. We want to work with the town once we have the results of the phosphorus mitigation study to apply for grants to actually get some of the mitigation work done. And we intend to continue working on best practices education in the watershed. Next. Now, this picture was not meant to embarrass Dave Paganelli, and I can testify to that because this is actually on Lexington Avenue in the town of Cortland.
All right.
But
But this is what they look like sometimes.
nevertheless, you can see that catch basin is completely filled with silt, so it's not functioning at all to take in storm water and precipitate out any particles containing phosphorus. Our long-term goal is to reduce the available phosphorus in the lake and reduce the phosphorus that's coming into the lake from the watershed through stormwater. Next. So what we need to do that is deal with phosphorus reduction, best management practices, and green infrastructure. And we need to sewer the balance of the Mohegan Lake watershed. Now, neither of these are easy things. I do want to present a petition that was given to the town in September of 2017 from some of the residents in the Mohegan Highlands area of Mohegan Lake who are not on sewers. Coincidentally, their area, if you look at maps of the areas where the soil is not suitable for septics, it coincides with that area where that petition is from. It was also the hardest area to sewer, and that's why it was omitted when the sewers were done around Mohegan Lake. But I think now with dollars for infrastructure coming from various levels of government, it's the time to try to get to work on it and see if we can make it happen. And there's other areas around the lake as well. Where I live, I'm on septic. So if we can get the balance...
If the water tables can't hold it, it does what it does.
Yeah. If we can get the balance of the lake sewered, it will go a long way. Next. So that comes to things that we need from the town. We need, for the catch basins that are right around the lake, that are in catchment areas that feed directly into the lake, we need annual cleaning of the catch basins. We need to keep our outflow stream clear, and Dave's done a lot on that for us this year, including dealing with the Route 6 New York State culvert that wasn't his responsibility. We need to work on sewer expansion. We have that one petition, which is quite old now, and we can get additional petitions to cover the rest of the area around the lake that's not sewered. But clearly, there's going to be a lot of funding needed to sewer those areas. And finally, the phosphorus mitigation that we're going to need to work on funding for. Next. And some people, somebody particularly sitting in the back over there, PJ would be very happy if I didn't mention we are also looking to see the town build out Rock Hill Park and expand recreational opportunities in the northwestern section of town. So we just want to keep that on your radar. And that's it.
As long as PJ carries the gravel in, we'll be good.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks.
Ken, I have a question for you.
Be right back.
You spoke about the sewering. Did you, with all of the inland waterway money that's out there, I assume you're referring to some of that for the use. Have you spoken to Senator Harcum or Assemblyman Slater if there is money that could be used towards sewering to get the septic out of that area?
Well, I haven't specifically because we're at square zero. We need to be at square one. We need to have gone from a homeowner's petition to at least a feasibility study where the town has, some kind of report on feasibility and cost estimate. Then we can go look at funding opportunities.
Well, I was just interested to know if we're, putting the cart before the horse, if we are going to need the state funds to see if they're available before we even start moving. Because it's great to do a feasibility study and say to the state, hey, we want to try to do this, because I think it would be cost prohibitive for the small sewering district or small district there to come around and say, hey, we did all the feasibility studies, and the state saying, well, there's no money for it.
Yeah. Well, I think this is probably going to need federal money as well, not just state money, frankly. And the thing with Halleck's Mill, for instance, when you had a real project identified, that's when you can really talk about, what kind of money can be obtained from state grants and from federal grants. So I think, there's limited benefit to just exploring in a vacuum right now.
I know that your lake areas are probably some of your hardest areas to put sewer in. You look out by Shrub Oak Lake, Mohegan Lake, so on and so forth. I'm not going to say that it can't be done, but the way in which it must be done is sometimes very onerous and expensive. It's interesting. A good number of those homes that are in and around the lake were only built actually to be summertime residences. Things have changed in years, and the usage around those, has expanded also. But not saying it can't be done, but it's like you say. I think it is going to have to be on a federal level as well. So possibly we can get our Congressman Lawler to help participate in that.
All right, Ken.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
You,
Thanks.
Ken. Thanks for all the work. I'm glad to see that we're making improvements. We're getting there.
All right, Ken. Thank you, as normal. Wonderful presentation. Our next up, we have a bench reimbursement grant that we are working on, and we have our Parks and Recreation Superintendent, Jim Martirano. It's going to give us a little background.
Yes, we have a great relationship with New York Presbyterian here, Hudson Valley, here in Yorktown. They've sponsored many movie nights. They've sponsored our senior advisory board, and now today they're looking to sponsor a bench at one of our playgrounds. I was talking to Wendy McNamara, from their coordinator of community affairs, and she said that she and the president, Stacy Petrover, and Ellen Bloom wanted to put forward a grant to put a bench at Junior Lake Pool. So we'd love to purchase that bench and have them reimburse us for that purchase. It'd be a green bench with their logo on it in the center, and be placed at Junior Lake Pool Playground.
All right.
They've already committed to paying for it? Is that what we're saying?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah. We have
It's just a matter of us passing resolutions for the money needed, and then they would reimburse us for
Yeah,
it.
it's just a it's like a reimbursable grant.
No, that's very generous of them, and they're really a great community partner. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see how anybody would have a problem with it. I certainly don't.
No, I don't have any problem with and like we say, it's $1,500 that they're gonna. It's going back into the coffers again.
Yep.
Just put it forward. And where was this going to be put again, Jim?
Junior Lake Pool, there's 3 benches that are needed there.
Gosh.
We're going to see how this year goes with them, and if they like the product, they're thinking about maybe doing the other 2 as well. So it'd be nice. And these benches are specifically for playgrounds. They're metal benches with kind of a rubber coating to keep the kids protected and safe. So,
Great.
And the reason we're buying them is because we have to have a certain type of
commercial grade.
bench to be utilized in our park systems for the obvious reasons of failure if they're not. It's kind of like those plastic chairs we all have. You have a few of them around the picnic table, and we know at some point somebody's going to lean back on them and they're going to break. We can't have that in the town or in our parks. So that's the reasoning behind that.
That's exciting. So hopefully this is another good partnership with them, and we can utilize this for years to come.
So what do we need, a resolution on this or something like
We
that?
have it coming up.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
You want me to stay up here?
You might as well stay right there. And we got Jim is going to talk about the Veterans Advisory Committee, who Ed is a participant in, with regarding to name change for Patriot Park.
I think there's a resolution that the Veterans Advisory has brought into their Parks and Rec meeting, which Diana was just given a copy. So that you gentlemen want to join Jim up here? Carl and Mike? So I'll go through this real quick. Whereas there are various sites within Yorktown purporting to memorialize or honor the memory of those veterans of Yorktown who have served our republic throughout years, and whereas a proper naming of these sites is a matter of considerable doubt and variability, be it resolved Veterans Advisory Committee to recommend to the Town Board and to the Recreation Commission that the following names be adopted and the sites be rededicated as follows, and they have the Veterans Field, Downing Park, and the Veterans Memorials Circle. As three parks identified with new names, being the Jack DeVito Veterans Memorial Field, the John Downing Veterans Memorial Park, and the Patriots Park, Patriots Circle. Be it further resolved by the Veterans Advisory Committee to recommend that the Town Board and to the Recreation Commission that the full prior consultation and consent shall be sought from the Veterans Advisory Council before the modification by placing, naming, erecting, or by any other means of either of the above referenced, the Veterans Field or the Veterans Memorial Circle. Then this was from September 20th. So wanting to have input into the name of any veterans memorial being placed into those areas. So
This was discussed on the commission level. We had John DeVito come in and give us a history of the name of the Jack DeVito Veterans Memorial Field and the history of his father, who is also a veteran. Every 8 years or so, they feel as if it comes up to change the name in that field, and they're adamant that they'd like to keep the name where it is. And it seems to be that the commission felt so as well, to keep Jack DeVito Veterans Memorial Field, Field and Track, the same name that it's been for the past 20 some odd years. However, when looking at Downing Park, it seems as though that the 202 ball field specifically had been named, and I can't find the history of it. Downing Park is Downing Park, but the 202 ball fields have been the Downing Veterans Memorial Fields somewhere along the way. I couldn't find a history of when those specific three ball fields got that the veteran's name. The commission did not have a feeling one way or the other, and neither do I on those 202 ball field names. Why there's nothing specifically there. There's no monument there for veterans or anything along those lines. And then looking at Patriot Park, John could probably speak at a higher level of the naming of Patriot Park. He was around when that happened. But the thing I was told that that space was for all patriots and not just specifically veterans. But however, our monuments at that specific park are for veterans and not just random patriotic symbols. They are truly a veteran space to reflect. So I think that we all agree that name could certainly use some changing at the circle.
John, do you want to speak about that, since you were pointed out as being around with the naming and some of what had gone through with that?
Well, I'll see if I can round out what Jim said a little bit. But at the time, Patriot Park was conceived after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I believe, at least a regional effort. So there are other Patriot Parks that happened as part of that effort. There's one or two in Orange County. They're sprinkled around. But anyway, they were conceived to honor, patriots, not necessarily, citizen patriots, and of course, veteran patriots. So the original concept for within the circle, if you recall, there's those 4 planting beds, was to name, split that into 2 and name it after 8 patriots, so to speak. The park has been evolving, and so that has not happened. But that was the original concept, and part of the evolution here, as we did the flags, and now we moved the monuments there. I think it's beautiful. I think it's a great space. I think it's a great park. But I mentioned it to Ed and Jimmy, just so during your deliberations, you take all the facts into account. That if there comes a time that there are like a political leader, historical figure, a first responder that bears some remembrance, whether or not they should fit in there or not is part of the naming process, I think. So really for your consideration as, background knowledge when you're considering what you're considering tonight.
Now as part of that, that monument area, isn't there something dedicated to Lorraine in there too? To Sistos?
There's a tree there for Lorraine. We have we have another tree for a veteran, but I think he was also a police officer. So yeah.
All right, and that tree I know goes back at least about 8 years, correct? For Lorraine?
That was, probably 2015 we did that.
15, yeah.
Yeah, 2015, 2016, yeah.
All right. Thank you, John. Gentlemen?
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, Honorable Councilman,
Major?
Madam Clerk, Counselor, fellow veterans. I'm Major Mike Sheridan.
Mr. Major, I forgot. I forgot.
Accompanied by my colleague from the Veterans Advisory Council, Carl D. Liberto. Back in September, we passed a resolution as a mutual courtesy with the Parks and Rec Commission. We were invited to come present it to them. We provided them courtesy copy. The intent of the resolution was for the town board. Don't know if the Parks and Rec Commission ever did anything with the resolution we provided to them. Don't know if they ever came up with a concurrence or a dissent, but evidently not. So nothing had reached you before this evening. When we came out of that meeting, it was a productive meeting, good dialogue, perhaps a bit contentious in portions. We had resolved as the Veterans Advisory Committee, no, we're not going to change our resolution at all. This is our resolution that we're presenting, and we'll give it to the town council, and they can solicit any other input they wish and come to their own conclusions and proceed accordingly. I would summarize it by saying the naming needs to be consistent, it needs to be established, and it needs to be followed throughout the town and by all agencies making use of any of these facilities. What had been Veterans Field on Veterans Road across from the Veterans locations is no longer Veterans Field. There's no Veterans Memorial aspects about it at all, nor is there any Veterans Memorial aspects to the Downing Park ball fields. The monuments that were the veterans monuments that used to be out front, now somehow, and granted they had to be moved to someplace and they were put over here, but they lost somewhat of their character of being the veterans monuments by being in the Patriots Park. And so now, if that's the Patriots Park and that's the Jack DeVito Field, is there any spot that is for the veterans that won't change its name 5 years from now? Can we find something in town, call it the Veterans Field, call it the Veterans Park, call it the Veterans Memorial, so that we can have a place to focus our Veterans Day ceremony activities, our Memorial Day ceremony activities? Because if there is no spot that is designated as this is the spot for veterans, we'll do Memorial Days in the cemeteries and we'll do Veterans Days at our posts. There's no sense if we don't have a place to go to for the community of veterans throughout Yorktown. We'll just go and do it at our place. Carl?
No, just with the naming, we were talking this evening, and when we met with the commission, and John gave us the history, one thing we failed to do was ask him what it was called when he went to the sixth grade school, when it was intermediate. We found out later on that it was Veterans Field before the gazebo was built. There is no Veterans Memorial, as Mike said. I was talking with Jim tonight, just to rearrange the wording. It is the Jack DeVito Memorial Gazebo. That's the only thing that's memorialized there. And the other thing is Veterans Field. So,
Oh, I see, and it was combined.
yeah, but it was combined a little mixed up because it's the Jack DeVito Memorial Gazebo. And that's what's on the bronze plaque next to the gazebo. And it was Veterans Field. So I don't know how John would feel about it, to change it to Jack DeVito Memorial Gazebo at Veterans Field. Now, if you ask anybody in town, where were you going? Oh, I'm going to the track. They don't call it this long name. I've heard it mixed up at board meetings. Nobody gets it right. It's a long name. And even tonight in your agenda, page 1, say Patriots Park. You look on page 3, where you're talking about the authorization for fund modifications, it says Patriot Garden. Can't even get the name of that place correct.
I think we got too many names.
It started out as Memorial Park. Then it became Patriots Park. On Harbor Day 2 years ago, I guess when that tree was put in, it was Harbor was added into the name. And you know, how many different names does a park have to have?
But the name of it is Patriots Park. That's
Right now, well, is it? Or is it Patriot Garden?
I've never heard of it
I've never
referred to as
heard it
Patriots
referred to as
Garden.
Well,
Patriot
it's
Gardens
Patriots.
myself.
Actually,
Park.
could John take it approach?
Thank you.
That's where things are.
Where did they find that?
So, to my knowledge, it's never been officially named. Okay.
Ah.
The Patriot Park effort after 9/11 was really started as Patriot Garden. That's how these things get, sort of talked about one way, talked
Conflated.
about another way. So, these naming, variations are just coming as it evolves. So, there's never been an official naming of that area. So you know.
Okay.
Okay.
You get an official name.
And Carl brings up a good point, which is that, and John, backs that up, as these names become conflated and mixed up. You could read through Parks and Rec book and think we have 3 different parks that are actually the same, because one person's writing something for it, another person's writing something, and a third person is putting something else in, and everyone has their own name for it.
Well, it's just like the lighting of the menorah at the Jack DeVito running track. That's what was put on the poster. So it's.
Well, that was the rabbi, so I'm not.
Well,
I'm not going to go after him
Probably
on
had
that, Carl.
something
No, he's too close to the big guy.
Yes,
I
but
think
Anyway,
what I'm also hearing is just the respect for the veterans. I'm hearing the confusion of how does a name get changed? I've also heard it in the Parks and Rec meetings. What are the process to do it? How does someone stamp it? How do we go back to when the memorial of Jack DeVito is the gazebo and it was added to the name when it could have been End, or something, and also, but I'm also hearing that you're here advocating for the need to actually have a place that's in honor of the veterans.
that's why we had the name the Veterans Memorials Circle.
So Diana is going to look back on the minutes.
Yeah, we have several times, and you're absolutely correct. It's different even in the minutes when they call it Veterans Memorial Field or Jack DeVito Gazebo or Jack DeVito Veterans Memorial Field. So let me go back and research if the town board at some point in time had a discussion on it and why they called it the way they did.
Right. I mentioned at Parks and Rec, I had gone back years ago when Jerry Knapp brought this up to the board. And I had gone to the library, I looked through the films or whatever, and I found the actual front page, I think it was the Yorktown at the time, to find out what it was called. The only trouble was, half the front page is missing. Now, why they scanned it in like that, I have no
We
idea.
may have that as a record, so we'll
So-
check that then.
That's why I was
You don't
curious
remember
as-
the date, do you?
Whatever the date is on that bronze plaque,
Okay.
right?
But even the building there, you know, I just saw it referred to as the YCC. It's the AACCCC, Albert A. Cappellini Community Cultural Center now. And, you know, I'm married to a townie, and her whole family calls it the sixth grade
Grade
school.
school.
Everybody does.
Right.
It's like they say the Trek.
Right,
You know, so you got these long names, people shorten it.
right. Even down to initials, AACCC.
I mean,
Some
that's,
people
that,
mess up the names.
that gets to be a little bit, you know, ridiculous after a while when you have to go through all those AAAA, CCCCC, and the Cappellini Cultural Center. That, you know, maybe we have to start shortening some of these. You know, anybody that's been in this town for any amount of time knows Al Cappellini. It can be named whatever you want, but it should be named as the Cappellini Cultural Center at this point. You know, and it's no disrespect to the Cappellini family in any way, shape, or form. But it's kind of hard to go through all that letters when you're just trying to describe something.
Well, it's even like if you put the full name for the field out.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, there's probably some give and take in all of this. You know, the Albert Cappellini Cultural Center. You know, so, some variation. I'm not just saying shorten it to 3 letters. You know, but you know that people will recognize right away. It'd just be like Veterans Field at Veterans Road.
And we can all get it
Veterans
right.
Patriot Park. I don't know. Downing was Downing considered a veteran park too? The ball fields are. Ball fields. Huh?
That
Well, I got to tell you,
It should be the easiest one to implement.
this town
baseball fields.
this town loves you guys, and we have a lot of respect for everything you've done. And I'm sorry that you guys feel as if, you know, I don't know, that the name's not right. I think we have to have a discussion, and I'm certainly, I certainly have absolutely no problem making it right for the veterans in this town.
You know, I think that Major Sheridan knows better than anybody how the military shortens things to acronyms and everything else.
I was in there too.
And you were in there too. And
Yeah, but you Air Force guys.
yeah, but you
are
Air
all-
Force guys,
all
you
above
know.
everyone, you know.
But you know, it was it's interesting. You know, we're
Yeah, 94.
it's how things get shortened through the years, and people just get used to saying them that way, and it's not right. So maybe we have to do a small study on what we're going to name things and how the names are going to be memorialized, especially for our veterans, because, you know, as Sergio said, we do respect our veterans and we want them to be respected as well. So, you know, that being said, we can let us research this at this point in time.
One thing that I think we can implement right away, and I sort of did it with the veterans, Vietnam Veterans Memorial, is see about anything that has to do with veterans is referred out to our Veterans Committee, just so they have that input, because you know, there are definitely some aspects that when you look at it, they see it out a much different window than what we look at it.
And, you know, it's just like
It's a great idea.
the 6th grade school
Absolutely.
or the Albert A. Cappellini Community and Cultural Center. If you don't call it something like the Albert Cappellini Cultural Center, it disrespects the man. And that is not what this town is about or intends to do, or for the veterans as well. So we'll have to come up with names of reverence for all the above. And, you know, working together, I think we can come up with something to be palatable for everybody.
You know, we even asked the Parks Commission if there was a procedure on how they name parks.
We don't have one.
No.
Actually, BJ, can you come on up here for a minute? As long as we got a member of our Parks Commission right here at hand.
I'm so glad he got invited.
Yeah, I was here for Ken. So I'm vice chair for about another 15 minutes before John takes over. Just first and foremost, thank you very much for your service. Really appreciate it. My son's right now a captain in the Army as well. He's in the reserves. So we didn't take you guys, like, ignore you guys at all. So we had several conversations. The commission is against changing the Jack DeVito Veterans Memorial Track and Field. As far as Patriot Park and Downing, like we said, we couldn't even find anything on Downing and why that was considered anything veterans. The name changing of anything else that these gentlemen would suggest, we're more than welcome to. The one concern we had, and the reason why we didn't send you guys any kind of memo or anything, besides the fact that you hate when I send you memos, is that there's some history that Falcone remembered and Cavabosa remembered about the change with APAR. The APAR field. And it wasn't as simple as a resolution from you guys or a resolution from the Parks Commission. It had, like, we were trying to find out from Bruce himself, like, what he had to go through. But my understanding, there is a procedure. We don't know what it is right now. But it's not as simple as just a resolution from you or a resolution from us. And one of the things that was very concerning to us, and the reason why we took the position on the Jack DeVito Veterans Field, was when we all searched Google, the Google Maps, Waze, everything else. You put in Veterans Field, that's what comes up. So you wouldn't want to create confusion. In addition to that, there's a lot of sport. The Yorktown YYSC plays there, and there's other things that use that field and facility. So that's the reason why we're a little bit hesitant on changing that name. But anything else that they suggested, we were more than willing to listen to. But we wanted to make sure we did it right. That's all.
I think Major Sheridan had something to offer on that Google search.
Yeah, Waze tells me I have to drive to Jack DeVito Field.
So they have it just shortened to Jack DeVito. What about Google? Do you know what they? Google has it right. Google has it right.
I got to tell
So
you.
don't use Waze anymore.
I got to tell you, people will always abbreviate names and get the names wrong, and I don't think there's anything we're going to be able to do to stop something like that. What we can do is we can officially, name these things in a way that is respectful and honorable to the men and women that fought for this country. And I think you're always going to get something that's wrong, and Google will always get it wrong, and so will Waze, and I get that. And even if we change it, I don't know if that will ever be accurate, because that takes time, and they got a little car that drives around with a camera on it, and they drive around every 5 years. And so, but like I said, I think we need to have a discussion about it. I don't have an issue with it myself, speaking for myself. And we definitely want to make you guys whole.
And that was the intent of our resolution entirely, was to bring it up as an issue of it needs resolution, and it needs, whatever the resolution is, it needs consistently applied across all agencies within the town. Control what you can control in your own publications. Over time, correct usage will drive more people towards the correct solution. You'll still have variances. But to get that rolling and provide you with our recommendations of this is what we would prefer to see, if you would ask us. We've provided our resolution.
Okay.
And I think probably part of it too is once everything is officially named, then we reach out to the Googles and the Waze and so forth, so that they can then change it on their computer end, of where it is. And I'm sure it's just a name change. It wouldn't be, I don't know if how often they do the drive-bys, but
Well, they probably get it off, I don't want to delve too much into the GIS, but they probably get it from OpenStreetMaps as a source, and they all derive from that.
Yeah.
Correct.
I always thought it was true if I read it on the internet. So
it was like the National
Well, that's
Enquirer.
that. I got some. Just one other thing on Veterans Field. I'm not looking to take Jack out of it or anything, but I think the gazebo is Jack's memorial. And yes, he is a veteran, but it's only his. So just if Jack or John and Anthony agree just to change it to Jack DeVito Memorial, say at Veterans Field, because prior to the gazebo, it was Veterans Field.
Now, was that suggested at the rec
No,
commission?
John was getting a little emotional. We didn't want to push it.
Yeah, okay.
But it would have to go to them if they agree to it also. But I
Right.
think because it's the Jack DeVito Memorial,
Yeah, I
It's not
appreciate
the
that,
veterans.
that thought and that concession of making sure they're.
yeah, that, no, it would have to be, I wouldn't
Yeah.
want
I
This
think,
way we-
I think that was missing 8 years ago,
Yeah.
or
Oh,
7 years
that
ago.
one. to get.
This way we can have further talk on it between us. You know, we'll set it up for another meeting and we'll get it on, future agendas. So that, you know, may we come up with, and we circle back with you gentlemen to say, okay, this is the names we come up with, okay? What do you think? And then we'll go from there and say, okay, hey, geez, that's even a better idea, but, you know, with all respect. All right, so,
All right, thank you very much for your.
thank you so
Gentlemen,
much.
thank you.
Good to see you guys.
Go nowhere, Jim. Stay right there. All right, we have, once again, James Mortorano Jr., the Parks and Rec Superintendent, to tell us about the improvements at here we go, Patriot Skate Park, Phase 3.
That's fun.
You'll remember this time last year, we were taking part in phase 1 and 2 of the skate park, which was the big ramps on the south and north side of the park. However, we had to wait for phase 3 because it would take too long with that portion. And if you just look at it, you may say, hey, why is the smallest part taking you the longest period of time? That specific piece is kind of the street skate portion of the park, which is custom cuts. There's all sorts of angles that are on that part of the park, grinding rails and things of that nature. So each piece has to be carefully taken off, and the cuts have to be custom. So we get the underlayment and the wooden slabs to go over the underlayment in slab size, 10 by 15. And that's fine with the ramp because it goes straight on the ramp, it just gets bent, and then you have to put the hardware, which is the hardware is, I think there's like 100 holes per part of the ramp, which is kind of crazy, and they have to be completely accurate to the metal framing. With this specific piece in phase 3, we have to measure them 100% accurately for it to work. So it's going to take a little bit more time, even though it's a smaller unit. So we're looking to, we're started this past, initially today, it was supposed to be Monday, but it was a little bit still wet outside. So we started today, we put out postings on our town website and our Facebook and Instagram last week that we would be closing the skate park down, and we should be open by March 1st. It's all weather pending. If there's 3 feet of snow out at the skate park, we're not going to be able to really get this project done by March 1.
Why not?
But April 1 would be our drop dead date of getting that park open. So,
I know.
but we're confident that
We're
gonna
doing
get
this
there.
for safety. It's not that they weren't safe for the people using them to be on, but it was time.
Yeah, they're over 13 years old,
Right.
and there's some minor cracking in there, and we wanted to kind of get them repaired, similar to how we just did our turf. It's good to keep up with these types of things and this type of maintenance. We have an incredible park staff, and shout out to them for working so hard. And they save the taxpayer base here so much money with the work they're able to do in-house. We could have contracted this job out and it would have cost us thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
But we're doing it in-house and it's just cost of
I-
materials.
I remember this whole project was fraught with peril because as soon as you started, when you guys looked underneath, it was all destroyed. You had to replace all the hardware underneath, and you had to get all of that, and we didn't anticipate that. So
Yeah.
no, I think, and it looks like it's coming out great. I think, I remember having a discussion with you and Parks and here at the town board meeting about, choosing the right time to shut it down.
Yeah.
And you followed through on that in phase 1. You followed through on that in phase 2, and it looks like you're following through on that in phase 3. You're shutting down. It's mid-December. And it's hard to work in mid-December and January and February. So
They're tough.
you're
They're
doing,
tough.
They're tough. They're tough as nails. But you guys are doing the right thing. So carry on. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Good job.
And this is not going to have any budget impact in 2023. All this material was purchased in 2022. So we're all set financially with that. So, we have all the equipment needed, and we're ready to start working.
I'm sure Janelle's very pleased with that.
They were smiling back there.
Yes, I saw the smile come on her face. All right.
Thanks, Jim.
Jim?
Thank you, Jim. Get it.
Thank you very much. All right, so everybody out there, the skate park's closed until further notice. For safety reasons, they're going to be redoing what they have to redo, so please refrain from going there looking to use it. Okay, we're going to move ahead here to our resolutions. All right. From engineering, authorize the bond release to Westchester Pond Pros in the amount of $500. Authorize comptroller to process the following budget transfer from sludge removal to overtime. That's an interesting transfer. The library, authorize the library director to sign a proposal with INF Associates LLC. LLC, and that has to do with a fully reimbursable grant for EV cars, or EV chargers, I should say. And then we have authorized the bond release to Lita Bloomberg in the amount of $500. And then we're going to go authorize comptroller to process the following budget transfer from library salaries to library unemployment. Then from our Parks and Recreation, authorize comptroller to process the following budget. What happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did that.
Paying attention over there?
You could just move everything on the agenda in one
Yeah.
motion.
I know generally we go through this. I'm getting asked questions from both sides here. Parks and Recreation, authorize comptroller to process the following budget transfer for the Parks and Parks and Recreation Department to purchase playground bench to be reimbursed by New York Presbyterian. That's one we had the presentation on earlier.
Yeah.
From Planning, authorize Historical Perspectives, Inc. for a review of documents, plans required to be submitted for Underhill Farm project. Authorize the additional cost of services rendered by BFJ, which is Buckhurst Fish and I guess it's Jacquemart, and it has to do with the overlay study for Yorktown Heights and Lake Osceola. From the Police Department, from salaries uniformed, put into longevity. And then from salaries uniform to police overtime. From the supervisor, authorize the supervisor to enter into an agreement with Lero GIS for 2 years. And we're going to authorize the supervisor to sign an agreement with the town insurance broker for the town's insurance. Authorize the supervisor to enter an agreement with County of Westchester for special enforcement details. And the town board also authorized the comptroller to fund modifications to Vietnam Monument. And we're going to authorize the town clerk to advertise a public hearing, and that's for Underhill Farms application for January 16, 2024. Mm-hmm. Authorize the town clerk to advertise a bid for used vehicle purchase, and then accept the resignation of.
Just add one thing to it. Can we also add the authorize town clerk to also do the bid for the RFP for engineering services?
I have that coming up. Authorize the town clerk to advertise bid for used vehicle purchase for the building maintenance department, and then we're going to accept the resignation of John Winter effective December 31st, 2023. John has gone on to be the highway superintendent of Lewisboro. Accept the resignation of water superintendent Ken Rundle. I almost said Ken Belfer. effective January 16th, 2023. Ken, it's been a pleasure dealing with you, and good luck. Authorize the town clerk to advertise a bid for purchase of new Chevrolet, purchase of a Chevrolet Tahoe or equivalent vehicle.
Is that a duplicate
No,
from the first one?
mm-mm,
Oh, it's two separate.
two separate ones. And then we're going to table this one. It's a just pay scale for Michael Hecker in the water department. We have some housekeeping issues we have to take care of on that we didn't realize at time that it was put into the agenda. We're going to authorize the following employees to carry over their remaining vacation time listed on the back. And no, Ed, I am not going to read every one ever so carefully.
Are you sure?
I'm positive. And then, all right,
You just upset Ken Belfort.
I upset Ken? Okay. Sorry, Ken. Be it resolved, supervisors authorized to what's that?
No, go ahead.
Authorize to execute a sponsorship acknowledgement form with the New York Presbyterian Hospital for $1,500 in funding for a new park bench at Junior Lake. And be it resolved that the town clerk is authorized to advertise a request for proposal for ad hoc engineering services. And, ladies and gentlemen, this is our last meeting until after the first of the year, until January 2. And we're going to be off the 19th and the 26th. There will be no meetings. And I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and may Santa bring you all the stuff that you want. And I'm going to put a motion on to adjourn.
Wait,
wait.
we didn't vote.
Resolutions?
What?
Motion on the resolutions?
Oh, yes, that would be good, too. Let's have a motion on the resolutions.
Motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
One more thing.
Again?
Mary,
Again?
Mary Capocha.
What about? Oh, my
Thank you,
God.
Come on, I'm here.
God, Mary
We
couldn't
wanna
be here
thank
today
her.
because she is out ill and couldn't make the last meeting. We want to thank Mary for being stepping up to the plate here,
Absolutely.
and filling actually my seat when my board was good enough to put me here. So I want
And
to
I'm
thank.
so excited I get to sit next to Pat.
There you
Oh,
go. You
poor
see,
Pat.
you move up. That was always my favorite chair. Right
That was
there.
my seat too.
But I'll tell you something. Thank everybody. I want to thank my board for the work they've done and we've done this year. I think it's been a Herculean task on some of the stuff we got through, and it's hopefully next year won't be as crazy. But
I think we say that every year.
yeah, and it never comes true. But thank you everybody, and thank you everybody out there, all the residents of town of Yorktown. Wish you a merry and a happy and have a great day. Have a great night. And
Thanks, Mary.
thanks, Mayor. And
Thank you, Tom, because you did a fantastic job this year.
well, thank you, Ed.
Yes,
I
thank
greatly appreciate that. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Yes.
moved.
All right. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I didn't think so.
Healthy and happy, everyone.